It's time for ACC Central, presented by College Baseball Central. Hosted by Monty Taylor, Micah Butel, and Nick Dioli.
Welcome back to another episode of ACC Central. We are continuing our team previews. I'm Monty Taylor. With me is Nick Dioli and Micah Butel. They are both back for another episode. We are on episode 11, I believe, of our previews. We are making some pretty good headway. We're getting closer. We are days away from opening pitch on February 14th. But Nick, we'll start with you. How are you doing, buddy?
Just days away. Can't complain. Very excited.
Well, I'll give you something to complain about soon. Micah, how are you?
What?
What? I'm good.
What? Good. I don't think I'm as good as I thought I was.
I'm not going to say anything more because I don't want to know what's happening. So.
If anyone's wondering, I am wearing one of my oldest football jerseys. It is a Brady Quinn jersey. It's almost 20 years old. I got it in 2006, I believe. Obviously, Brady Quinn was the quarterback at Notre Dame at the time. Jeff Samardzija was out there. Tom Zibikowski.
What a pull. Yeah, Chicago Cub legend.
Yeah.
Excuse me, San Francisco Giant.
Oakland A's legend for half a season. I think it might have gotten a full season before he got traded to the White Sox.
Never forget, he got a concussion in the middle of a fight with Bryce Harper when his own player knocked him.
Was that when Strickland threw at Harper?
Strickland threw at Harper, and then Michael Morris and Samardzija just collided, banged it. That's what sent Michael Morris to retirement. Was that concussion?
Wow.
Yeah, never saw Michael Morris play again.
It's funny you're talking about the Nationals, and I assume Michael Morris was on the Nationals, but he was on the Giants when you're describing.
He was on the Giants when that happened.
Oh man. All right, good times. But we're talking about the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Obviously, we all know what happened to their football team. They made it to the national championship, fell quite short. But we're here to talk about Notre Dame baseball and Sean Stifler in his third season. Micah is the only one of the three of us who got to see Notre Dame in person last year, I believe.
Yeah, and if they want, they can fly me out to any game they want because they throw no hitters when I'm there.
Yeah, absolutely. That is, just a great season. We ranked them 16th in our power rankings. I know both you guys did. I actually ranked them 15th. I'm actually a little bit higher on them than even, I think, 15th. But I had to put them somewhere. But let's take a look at our key departures here. And I think we all can agree on who their biggest loss might be, given what they could have had coming back. But I'll start with you, Micah. Who do you think their biggest loss is going into this season?
No, turn it over to Nick because he knows his own order.
Nick, who is the biggest loss for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish?
I mean, yeah, I think it is Matt Bedford. I'd give Jack Penny a little grace too there as well. But Matt is going to be a huge loss for the Irish. I know he's going to be a key role for Wake this season in their bullpen or wherever he ends up on that Wake pitching staff. But Matt Bedford is a big loss for the Fighting Irish this year.
Yeah. Micah?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Caden Spivey in our Georgia Tech loss. I think that was excited to see him continue to progress with Notre Dame. So that's a tough loss for them as well. I mean, obviously, Nick mentioned it too. Jack Penny is a big one. David Glancy is obviously a tough one too.
Yeah, I have an interesting question. If Matt Bedford is back for the Irish, and let's say he's your Friday night guy, and you've got Jack Radell and Rory Fox, does that raise Notre Dame above the 16 for you guys?
Yes.
Yes.
How much?
I'll
let you go first, Micah.
I'm just talking out loud because I think I had BC at 15. I have to pull up my thing, but I think I probably jumped them up to 14. Yeah, they probably jump BC because then I trust at least. Again, we talked about BC, right, Monty? Like AJ Colarusso is the arm that you're most confident in, and I mean Matt Bedford versus AJ Colarusso, who you taking right now? So, I think I jump them. I jump BC and I'd probably jump Cal. I don't think I'd jump like Pitt or Virginia Tech, but they'd probably be 14.
Love that. Love that. All right. Good to go ahead.
I think potentially for me 13, because with mine I had, let's see, Cal 15, Pitt 14, and then Virginia Tech 13. So that 14-13 area, I don't know if I'm quite jumping them over Virginia Tech, because to me Virginia Tech is a big question mark, but they are definitely not 16 or 15. I think they jump 2 or 3 spots.
All right, good. I just wanted a hypothetical in there for any SEC fans watching. I know how much they love those.
Undefeated.
Yeah, I thought I might get a laugh out of Micah, but key newcomers, we've got quite a bit here. And if you'll notice, heavily on the recruiting side.
Wow.
Probably the most recruits we've got listed on the key newcomers there, but there are some interesting names in there. But, you know, at quick glance, is there anybody that jumps off the page for you, Micah, in terms of who's coming in here?
I mean, there's not like a single name that jumps off too crazy. Jared Zimbardo, was someone I wrote about last year. Quinnipiac, I believe, played Boston College in a weekend. I think it's who it was. They played somebody in the ACC.
That sounds right.
So I talked about him as being one of their key players. Again, not saying too much. It's not like Quinnipiac is a Northeast power in college baseball, but college hockey, sure, but college baseball, no. But he's obviously a nice addition to have to fill some voids in the outfield. Jack Walker was pretty impressive at Toledo, so that's someone I'm kind of excited about. And it's really just, I mean, I don't want to get too far into my overall look at Notre Dame, but you know, a lot of these newcomers are, I mean, we'll just see how they adjust to playing in the ACC, in a conference where, like, we have a lot of knowns, and I mean, Notre Dame has some of the most unknowns.
Yeah, and I think that's probably why a lot of people put them 16th in our power rankings. Obviously, I had a chance to do some of my research and deep diving before we did our power rankings, which, you know, may have played a factor. Who knows? Nick, is there anybody who jumps off the list? I know obviously the big thing is here you've got a lot of recruits versus only a few transfers, and it's hard for Notre Dame to get any undergraduate transfers. I think they said they only had like 5 total across all sports, 5 undergrad transfers for this school year.
Yeah, I mean, you can even go back to like watching the college football playoff. They talked about how like it was just, you know, they didn't have a lot of transfer guys. I mean, obviously Riley Leonard was the biggest guy they had,
and he was still a grad transfer, right?
Exactly, yeah. So, you know me, I love the Ivy League guys, so I think Clark Gilmore would be huge for them. But other than that, I mean, nothing really jumps out to me except, you know, when you look at their key departures, it's not a ton of position players like we kind of seen with other teams. And they do a pretty good job getting some other position players and pitchers too, because that's what they lost mostly was a lot of pitchers for their key departures. So I think that's what kind of sticks out to me is that they don't really need to replace a whole lot of the starters and kind of names that you were used to.
Absolutely. We'll jump right into the pitchers then. You know, I mean, I'm really excited about some of these freshmen that I read about. I guess I'll shout out Dylan Hine because he follows me. The transfer from Arkansas State, a lot of starting experience, but I'm really excited about this rotation. I've already talked about it on a couple of shows, but Jack Raydell and Rory Fox return, and then they've got quite a few options with experience behind him. But I want to tell you something interesting here. What if I told you that in conference play, Notre Dame was a top 6 pitching unit?
I'd believe it.
I believe it.
They couldn't hit.
Yep. So
I believe it.
They couldn't hit.
Yep. But I think sometimes for some reason when you think a team does really poorly, I was under the impression they did hit because some of their guys did hit some home runs. And I think when they did score runs, they scored a lot. But when they didn't score and they lost, I thought that the pitching staff was worse than the hitting, but it's actually the other way around. So I think, again, the strength is going to be in this pitching staff. And I'm a big fan of Jack Raydell. I think he's probably the most underrated sophomore arm. especially since like I mentioned like 40 arms in my article for Just Baseball, and he was not even mentioned as like a possibility. And I think that's a major oversight on my part. Rory Fox is the younger brother of the former Duke pitcher Luke Fox, and I think those two guys are set for the rotation. But yeah, you got to be excited about this group. Is it, I think they're going to be really good pitching wise in terms of the bottom part of the ACC.
Yeah, I think what I guess is intriguing is Jack Riddell is someone that you should be excited about. But when you compare him to like the Friday guys across the ACC, it's like he still ranks coming into the year near the bottom. And that's where, for me, again, some of this hesitation with this pitching staff like kind of lies, because it's just like you want to believe and have confidence that like he's going to obviously take a step forward too. But look at around the conference with the other Friday guys. I mean, teams that like you could say are like kind of fringe where Notre Dame would hope to be. Tate McKee, Georgia Tech. Patrick Forbes, Louisville. Like, do you think that Jack Riddell is better than either of those two at this moment, Monty?
No.
And so that's where, like, I guess, that's some of the the hesitation is with that is, I agree with you on the take about Jack, but I'm just a little concerned. It's like, that's your best. And against everyone else's best, I don't know how much better it is. And then again, the other teams have more depth in that rotation.
But I wonder how many people would have said the same thing in his Saturday role. Sure. It's just an interesting kind of
maybe you throw him on the Saturday role. I mean, I'm not saying you want to go that route, but maybe you get creative and he is your Saturday guy again this year, and you have the advantage now on Saturday.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that.
It's not a terrible approach. I mean, I'm not saying that it's what they need to lock in, but I'm very bummed, Monty. They were going to come to Lamar, so I could have saw him second week of the year, got a little more insight on him. But
and an interesting guy. He didn't have a good year last year, but Jackson Denny's was a regular weekend guy in 2023, and obviously suffered some injuries and didn't play well. But he could be a guy if he has a bounce back year. That could be an interesting guy. But then obviously you've got the experience of the guys behind him. But what are your thoughts here, Nick, on this pitching staff?
Much older. What?
I was gonna say I meant rotation, not pitching staff. Just we'll talk about the staff as a whole in a second. But
so much older guys that I think need to prove something. I think Micah brings up a great point that Jack Riddell is someone that we're all excited about. And he has time too. He was really good last year. It's only going to be his second year. The potential for him to be like an elite pitcher in the ACC come, if he proves himself this year, going into next year as well, he could be like a top dude in this conference. I think there's a lot of potential there, but there's a lot of unknown, and I'm excited to see what they throw out there. I know you're really high on them, or not really, but higher than most people are. So it's going to be interesting to see how this rotation shapes up.
Yeah. As we look at the relievers, the depth is going to rely on those freshmen, right? And three of those key freshmen will be, Kellen Klosterman, Chase Vanamidi, and Brady Coaster. And you'll look and see the lefties. We got two lefties total that look like they might be key arms. There's going to be I think they've got some other options if they want to really get some lefties in there. But the depth is a little alarming, but I like what they have at the, in their top, 7, 8, 9 guys. But, they're going to have to continue to pitch as well as they did in conference play last year to be successful.
It is crazy how much older, this is the oldest group of guys I've seen so far.
And I really like Ricky Reith. I got to see him obviously in 2023. He was a Kingsport Axeman. He was a stud that summer for them. Pitched in like 14 games, had like a sub-2 ERA. But, I mean, he was pretty good last year too, right? I mean, he's got really good command. So if he can just get a little bit more control in terms of getting guys out, working on that slider, like I think he could be someone that could be a big part of that bullpen. for them if they're going to make a run to if it's a 12-team ACC tournament, push for an ACC tournament spot, or obviously push for an at-large spot in the NCAA tournament in general.
Yeah, and obviously, again, they're going to have to rely on some of these freshmen. It's Kellen Klosterman's a guy that can throw 96, 97 and has a really good slider. He's going to get opportunities when you can pitch like that, right? But does he have the command to match that? And then, I mean, I love the height on these guys. I mean, 6'6", Brady Coaster's 6'6". I mean, and they went and got Northern kids. I really like that they really found guys that kind of fit that identity and have, that Midwest culture and work ethic. And I'm really excited to see how it all comes together.
Yeah.
But we'll move along to the position players. After we look quickly at what the potential pitching staff might look like. Right now, I kind of had Raydell, Fox, Hine, and Hellwig. They very well could go with one of the freshmen in that midweek role as well. But I think Burkholz and Reith are going to be your two main relievers. But I think McDonough and Denny's and Gilmore are going to be key pieces as well. Anybody? You feel any better about Notre Dame as a whole after this conversation about their pitching staff, or are you guys still kind of no? Micah's shaking his head no. Nick, you don't feel any stronger about them?
Maybe just a smidge, just because they're older. They're older than most pitching staffs and rotations, so that gives me a little bit more of a confidence boost.
I think Notre Dame's getting punished, Monty, by me and maybe by some in general. Not because I don't think Notre Dame is capable of special things. This is the best this conference has been. So you're not getting. There's no again. Cal is one of those teams on the bottom feeder, but the bottom of our polls. But there's a lot of questions about them too. Yeah. And again, if they click, they have the talent to contend for an NCAA tournament spot. I think all of us would say that all 16 teams have a legitimate chance if things go right to be NCAA tournament teams. And so I think that's where Notre Dame's getting punished. Because I kind of agree with you, Monty. Do I actually think Notre Dame's really bad at baseball? No. I think we'll get to their non-conference schedule. I feel there's a world where we're feeling pretty good about them going into ACC play, looking at their record. The problem is stacking up against, even a Louisville or Georgia Tech right now. I don't think any of us can confidently say we think Notre Dame's better than them. And that's where I think Notre Dame gets punished. It's not that I don't think they're a good enough team. They're not a good team. So I think the teams Notre Dame, I don't know if they got better than last year. I wouldn't say they got much worse, but I don't know if they got much better. But a lot of teams in the ACC got better from last year.
Yeah, I think it's going to depend on the freshmen, right, and how quickly they acclimate. To whether I don't think we're going to be able to judge if they got better until we see what those freshmen can do, because they're going to have to be thrust into a lot of playing time that I don't think other teams have as much, are going to depend on as freshmen as much as Notre Dame's going to end up doing.
And I think there's something to be said too, when we're talking about young arms, for example, you don't get to do as many live ABs at a school like Notre Dame because you have to be indoors. There's a pundit, I know it's lame, but there's a reason why college baseball is slowly but surely becoming more and more dominated by the Southern schools. I think there's something to have to do with the fact that, you can't even spend the first – they're going to spend the first month on the road because they can't play at home because they're going to be canceled if they play at home. So I think there's just a lot to be said about, again, this is not a shot at Notre Dame. It's just, again, if Bedford and what am I talking about on the Georgia Tech transfer? Jeez. Spivey, if they both were coming back, right? Those were guys that kind of – I feel bad for Stifler in this team because, they've – developed some pretty good guys, but then of course they've now gone on to leave. So it's again, they're going to be, there's a lot of growing pains they're going to experience, and they're going to have to do it away from home. They're going to have to do it if they're practicing at home in an indoor football facility or something like that. It's like they have a baseball dedicated only indoor that they can do live ABs in. At least they do. I didn't see it when I was there. So they're just getting, again, unfortunately for them, someone has to be 16. And so for me, I'm not feeling any better because there's just so many, what are they going to do or how are they going to develop? So,
yeah, for me, I thought some of the advantages they had over Cal might help. in terms of the home field advantage that they tend to have. Then I thought that because their pitching had less question marks than I think Cal's does, that's what kind of argued it for me. But of course, Cal also has those two middle infielders who are special. But yeah, it's gonna be interesting to see. It'll be a lot of fun to see how these teams come together. And speaking of the offense that struggled last year, we've got some guys here. They lose. I can't remember the catcher's name, but they Tony Lindweedle. But they have Joey Spence back. I think it's only a matter of time before I think Carson Tinney will probably take that job. Carson Tinney, I think, is a stud. Ryan Munger, who I got to interview a couple weeks ago, he's the assistant coach. I mean, there's an argument that Carson Tinney is the best offensive player on their team. And if that's the case, he needs to be in the lineup one way or the other. But looking at this infield, we got two guys that we know are going to produce, right? In Connor Hinks and Estevan Moreno. But then after that, it's a little bit of a question mark. But I'm going to let Micah talk a little bit about Estevan Moreno.
I mean, that's my guy. I mean, clutch hitter, very sound defensively. I mean, he is the anchor for this Notre Dame lineup, in my opinion. I mean, he's someone you can rely on to get on base, and obviously he's had some moments as well in key situations. But again, I mean, at the end of the day, right? That's our key guy, and he still only hit 275 last year. So, I'm believing that he's going to take a step forward. I'd like to think he's going to end the season around 300, a lot closer to it than he did last year. But it is something to kind of to circle. But he is one of the better shortstops in the conference, maybe even in the country. So if he takes another step forward, it's going to be really fun to see what he can become.
Yeah, and you just reminded me when you mentioned his defense. Notre Dame had one of the best defensive teams in the country last year. That's going to be something they need to have again, I think, to be successful, given the fact that they need to rely on pitching and defense to kind of win some games at the offense.
And they only have like 9 errors or something ridiculously low.
Yeah, something insane. And
yeah, it was. I mean, it was impressive to say the least. I mean, like there was no. They the one thing I'll give Notre Dame credit for is they never really shot themselves in the foot last year.
Yeah. Also, to note, Drake Bowen's a football player.
That's right. I remember seeing that. That's right.
Yeah. So he's probably just joined the team for the first time. But Nick, what you want to talk about Connor Hinks, or do you want to talk about some of the kids here? Or you want to talk about Nick DeMarco finally potentially being an everyday guy at third base for the first time in his career?
Yeah, that's what I was going to bring up. I think Nick DeMarco is going to be a guy that you have to look out for, senior this year. Hopefully going to be an everyday guy. I mean, you got 2 freshmen that are right behind him. And I think that's like Monty, you've been talking about it. There's a lot of freshmen on this team that are probably going to see a lot of time this year, especially in the midweeks. So I like what Notre Dame's doing. It seems like, in the third year of a new head coach, they're starting to build something, and I would love to see some of these freshmen get time and hopefully build for the future, because it's year 3 and we got to see something. We got to see something out of these, talented kids. So, but Nick DeMarco, I think, is going to be a guy that you kind of have to circle and say, this could be a difference maker, senior, third base. Might be the guy that gets us hopefully to regionals or make a run in the ACC tournament.
Yeah, and speaking of one of those freshmen, Noah Coy is a guy who is actually competing for that shortstop job. We're assuming it's going to go to Estevan Moreno, but the other one's going to be at second base. But he's going to play. He's one of the freshmen that I think is going to be a starter. But I know they're really high on Bino Waters. He's got a lot of pop, and they might need that bat in the lineup. Parker Brustovich is another one that, might, if Nick DeMarco struggles, might be right there waiting in the wings. They're going to have a lot of young position players getting opportunities. Those 3 names in particular on the infield are going to get opportunities. But now talking a little bit about the outfield, you bring back 2 guys in DM Jefferson and Brady Gumpf. One of those guys was a little bit better, had a little bit better season than the other. And then Jared Zimbardo, who Micah mentioned from Quinnipiac, are probably your 3 starting guys. And then you've got 2 freshmen behind them. And then, do you think those 3 guys can hold down the fort, or do you think a freshman is going to break through, Micah?
I mean, I don't know if I'd say they're not going to hold down the fort, and that's not going to be your more often than not starting three. But I think you're going to see a lot of Jace Lee and Jaden Knight. I think something that stands out right off the bat, Monty, is like we've had some teams where the outfields are a little bit of a question mark, but you have 9 guys battling for 3 spots, where again we kind of feel like there's 5 guys for 3. So that's where I'm intrigued, because again, like, let's just call it what it is. Baseball is a lot of games in a short period of time. Like, wear and tear happens. Like, that's where I get a little bit worried, is like, it's nice veteran leadership out in the outfield again Brady Gumpf is someone that I think deserves, not that we haven't hyped him up, but like, he was actually really good last year for Notre Dame. I really enjoyed what he brought to the table. He hit 284, had a little bit of pop. So he's someone he didn't really strike out a lot, if I remember correctly. I could be completely mistaken on that, but he's someone I think you should be excited about. But again, it's like, if something, again, just wear and tear happens, right? They're graduates, so they're 23, 24 years old. Like, if they need to go, are these freshmen ready? And again, we're punishing Notre Dame, right? Like, this is a talented team, but we're comparing them to 15 other ACC teams that have either more depth or more solid answers. So, but I do think this is the 3. And again, I really do like Jared Zimbardo at center from Quinnipiac.
Yeah, and Jason Lee is another big guy, 6'6", star basketball player, and again, somebody who might have a lot of power. And again, this is a team that wants to hit the ball more. So that's somebody to look forward to. And then, of course, you could force Parker Brustowich or Bino Waters into the outfield in one of the corner spots as well. But Nick, what are your thoughts on this depth chart as a whole?
It's a combination of a lot of guys that are green and a lot of guys that have experience. Green, get it? Irish.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what keeps popping into my head, Micah brings up a good point that the ACC got better and we don't know what Notre Dame is. I'm just throwing out a hypothetical. If this roster right now was like in the Big Ten, are we saying that this roster is a top half Big Ten team, maybe top third, or is it just kind of in the middle, or maybe even lower? Because the Big Ten is growing in baseball, especially when they just got the Pac-12 teams, Oregon and UCLA and USC, and then you had teams that were already established that are also on the rise: Iowa, Penn State, Indiana. Where would you guys say that Notre Dame would rank in the Big Ten?
I'd put them in the top 8.
Yeah, that's kind of where I was thinking.
Yeah, I think I have the audacity to say, like, a lot of people are saying Missouri is the worst team in the SEC. I might take Notre Dame over Missouri. From the bottom feeder of preseason polls in the ACC and SEC. So I think this team, again, I feel bad because I make it sound like I think Notre Dame is the worst baseball team of all time. I don't think that at all. It's just comparing them to the rest of the conference is tough to be as positive when you're talking about, apples to apples.
I believe in Notre Dame. I've believed in them since about midway through last year. I was rooting for them hard to backdoor into the NCAA tournament with their RPI. I still believe in them. I'm going to be positive, even if Micah hates them. But yeah, go Irish.
I think what stung was, Monty, you just kind of said it, right? Like, back half of the season, they got better, right? They started to play home games. They had success at home, and they couldn't even back end their way into the ACC tournament. So
well, at one point,
they just have such a disadvantage that, like, I just genuinely, again, like, it's already the struggle, right, of competing with teams that have, I guess Florida State did have snow this past week, but, like, you're competing with schools that you can practice indoors or outdoors year round and everything like that. And you're just kind of, just at a disadvantage. And again, tough when you lose some of your best players to other ACC teams in the portal.
And what stinks is that, like, you look at the Big Ten teams and, they're like, oh, you keep saying, well, if these Big Ten teams can do it, why can't Notre Dame? Well, again, Notre Dame has to travel a lot. They are playing the ACC. But we have seen it been done before. I mean, 2 years ago, Boston College had to travel, and they almost made super regionals. And they did really well on that road schedule 2 years ago when they had to travel. It's possible.
I mean, Notre Dame went to Omaha, 4 years ago now, technically? 3 years
exactly.
ago?
Like, it's not out of the question that this Notre Dame program can get back to where they once were. So we could blame the weather and the disadvantage all we want for this team, but it's been done, and it's been done with other teams in this conference too.
I'm going to play, yeah. I mean, again, a story that will always stand out to me. So, Monty, did I tell you the story about last year when I was at Notre Dame, about like what I saw that just rocked my world?
Probably.
You could donate to NIL to pick the players' walk-up songs. That tells me you're hurting for NIL money for your sport. If we're letting people pick walk-up songs for the players in exchange for NIL money. Like, I think it's just the reality of like the current landscape at Notre Dame or at schools in general, right? Like, yeah, the weather is an obstacle, but it's also like Notre Dame has hockey, Notre Dame has lacrosse, and no disrespect to the baseball program, lacrosse has won national titles in recent years. Hockey is always contending for national titles. Like, there's just so much that they have to compete against. Like, I believe this program can get back to being consistent, but I really do worry about them in the long term if they're going to be able to have success. Because, again, like, it's just, unfortunately for Notre Dame, I wouldn't even say it's a top 4 sport in their pecking order. Where at a lot of schools in the ACC, it's top 3, top 2. So
I believe in Notre Dame, even if Micah doesn't. I'm going to continue to.
Hey,
hype
Monty,
them
just
up.
wait till March or April when I'm all in on Notre Dame.
I'm going to be so and everyone loves you, even though everyone loves the redemption arc. Here we go. Let's take a look at this lineup and potential batting order here. Like I said, Noah Coy in there. You've got some nice options in there. Obviously, I think Carson Tinney you'd probably want in the lineup there over Jace Lee, maybe at the DH position. But this is what you're looking at here as a potential batting order. It's not terrible.
No,
I think it can be good. Again, it's going to depend on those freshmen. I think.
Do you think this lineup's better than last year? I think it might be.
It could be, yeah. I mean, especially with the development of certain guys, yeah. And there's Estevan Moreno right there. There's Noah Coy, actually, the freshman. Possibly one of the early pictures of him in an Irish uniform.
Did they wear all green last year?
I'm not sure.
Because like I was looking at this and I was like, man, I do not like the picture on the left, but the green with the white, beautiful.
Yeah. I'm sure they probably did a little bit, did both, but yeah, I'm not sure.
I don't remember the all greens, but maybe they did.
Here's their schedule. They start out on the road, but they do have their home opener against Eastern Michigan. They're going to have Iowa and Stetson at Stetson, Michigan State, Northwestern, Purdue, Kentucky. Interesting non-con. Nick, what are your thoughts on the schedule?
A lot of big names and a lot of potential to really prove yourselves. Stetson, NCAA team. Iowa missed out, but we know what they are. Kentucky, NCAA team. There's names here that they can take, and they can get off to a pretty decent start before they get into conference play. I think that's really important for Notre Dame, is to get the wins where you can right now, and then just kind of ride the momentum in the conference play.
Real quick, because I'm a liar, they don't play Kentucky. I apologize, Nick.
I was like, where is Kentucky?
Yeah.
Right mascot. They are playing the Wildcats, just the wrong ones.
Yeah, that's a mistake. That would be a big boost. But then I was like, man, it's random they're playing Kentucky. And I was like, they're not playing Kentucky, guys. But the other teams we mentioned, they are, in fact, playing. But sorry about that, Nick.
No, Micah, you're good. You're good. I see it now. It's Northwestern.
Yeah. Micah, who you wanted to talk a little bit about the schedule. You actually think they've got a somewhat favorable schedule early on.
Yes, but no, you're on the road. That's obviously never ideal, but I mean, it's not like brutal. Again, it's just Stetson. But what I don't know. I guess I don't think I've talked to you about the schedule, Monty. So I'm confused why you say I think I had it easy.
You mentioned it earlier in this episode. You said
well, again like playing. Okay, I don't think whatever. Anyways, the ACC schedule though to start is awful. Like that's an awful. Like Monty, I might be bold enough to say they have 2 wins in the ACC going into April. I mean, you're going to Wake, you're going to Clemson. Again, we're talking about a team that's trying to figure things out. I mean, granted, like hopefully you figure it out when you get North Florida and Belmont and Winthrop and all that stuff. But at Wake, at Clemson, a Georgia Tech team we're high on, Florida State are your first 4. I mean, yeah, obviously the home games with Georgia Tech and Florida State will be interesting, but they're still working through some things. Like that could legitimately be a 2-10 start to ACC play.
Do you have anything nice to say about Notre Dame?
Yes, I'm just being honest. Like we've seen teams that got way easier schedules to start. We just talked about NC State, a show ago now? Like that was the exact situation. Was they were kind of able to ease into it a little bit. You're playing at Wake Forest, a team that's got a lot to prove, tough place to play. If you're trying to figure out pitching, I don't think that's a ballpark you want to figure out pitching at. You're going to Clemson, who, again, is my preseason number 1 team in the ACC and always one of the best environments in the conference. You got Georgia Tech, who we're high on. So, again, maybe you win that series and gets you on the board. But, again, we're high on Georgia Tech. And then Florida State, the unanimous number 2 team in the conference. I mean, that's not ideal. Like, I mean, again, it gets better at BC, Virginia Tech, even like Cal at home, Louisville at home. Like, you could feel pretty good about some of those. But again, we're talking about a team that's trying to figure things out. That is the wrong teams to be trying to figure things out against.
Yeah, absolutely. You are correct. I was just giving you a hard time a little bit there. But
I feel bad, Notre Dame. I really do. I mean, I saw you play and you threw a no-hitter. I still to this day think it was one of my favorite ballparks I went to. I loved the layout. I loved Notre Dame in general on campus wise. I mean, I grew up going to a Catholic school. My high school fight song was Notre Dame's fight song. But like, they're just getting thrown so many just obstacles. And sure, can they overcome it? Yes, they can. But it's hard to just be all bought into that when, again, like, I mean, don't get me wrong. Even if let's say they go, I don't know how many games there is, but let's say 14-2 in non-conference before, they really get into the ACC peak. None of those games on that schedule is really going to help their RPI enough to where they can't be, they'd have to be sitting close to 500 in ACC play.
They'd be sitting in the same situation as last year, basically, I think.
Correct. And then, again, like that was a worst place scenario or worst case, like is that a terrible spot to be? No, it probably means you're not the bottom, the last team in the ACC. But again, you're talking about a situation again, like last year, right? Notre Dame hosted some of these bigger name teams at home, and they got them later in the year. I mean, your later of the year series is like your last ACC home series is May 3rd, like your last ACC home game.
On the other hand, I do like Georgia Tech and Florida State potentially being in a chilly environment.
True.
In March, but you're right. They could be trying to still figure things out at that point.
Like that Virginia Tech series, strategically enough, works out really well. That could be where, like, if Virginia Tech gets off to another kind of hot start and Notre Dame is kind of struggling in ACC play, I'm dumb enough to say, oh, forget about Notre Dame having success at home in the past. Like, give me Virginia Tech to take 2 or 3 or sweep, and then Notre Dame wins the series or even sweeps the series. Like, it's very plausible that happens. But again, like we're talking about April 4th. Like that's 4 ACC series is in. And if you're, let's say, 3-9 and to start ACC play, you've got a lot of work to do to play catch up to get back into, again, if we're talking about the 12-team ACC tournament, if that is still a thing this year.
Yeah. Let's talk. Micah has brought forth all the concerns and some of the obstacles, but Micah, do you think they can you said they could. Do you think they will overcome some of these? We'll start with what's their what's their ceiling, and what do you realistically predict will happen?
Their ceiling is the NCAA tournament. I think that's probably the best it can be. I mean, maybe it's a super regional if all works out, but I think what I expect to happen is I think they're going to be the worst team in the conference. I just think they got so many obstacles to overcome that I don't think it plays out very well for them. Again, them and Cal could go neck and neck, and that series is at Notre Dame, correct? So like that could be a deciding factor. But again, I really like those two guys in the middle of the infield for Cal. So I just don't think that, again, in a conference where it is the best it's ever been, there's way too many question marks about this Notre Dame team. And again, like I think there is something to be said about two of your best arms coming into the end of 2024, transferring to other ACC schools. That's a tough pill to swallow. So I'm sorry that Notre Dame has to be the negative one for me, but I guess someone has to be the 16th, like Monty always says. So for me, I just think that I really do think they're going to get off to a really slow start, and
in ACC
I don't know
play.
if they're going to be able to correct. Yes, correct. In ACC play. And even honestly, man, like North Florida is not a bad program. Like if you don't have it figured out, you could lose that weekend. I'm not saying they will, but they struggled with Tennessee Tech last year in a non-conference weekend. So like anything's possible. Like again, because they have to go on the road, and like let's call it what it is. I mean, we were hoping to host them at Lamar. Like to say when you're North Florida that Notre Dame is coming to town, that is a big deal to your students, to your fan base, to everybody else. Like you become a Super Bowl in a sense to those programs, even though it is Notre Dame baseball. Like this is a team 3 years, 4 years, whatever it is, math wise, removed from Omaha.
2022.
Yeah. So again, my math though is saying, do you count on 25?
Never mind. Just
so
continue your thought.
Like it's going to be a big deal for them. It's going to be a struggle. So
Nick,
ceiling NCAA tournament 3 seed. That's why I see the potential there. I think there are some series where they could potentially take 2 of 3. Even the big ones, they could take 1 of 3, and that could be just enough for RPI purposes. I think this team is a little bit better than last year. I think they can take advantage of, the midweeks, the easier schedule or lighter part of the schedule in the beginning of the season. So there's talent. This is the ACC. And, if Micah is saying that this team can make the regionals and potentially win, that just shows you how deep this conference is. So I say ceiling 3 seed in a regional spot. I don't know if they advance anywhere else, but the schedule can't play in their favor because I think they added some talent. And I think these freshmen are going to be pretty good. Floor, bottom 16. Depending on how they do the ACC tournament, if there are spots that, or if there are teams that are going to be left out, Notre Dame would be one of them, I think.
I'm with you guys on the ceiling. If everything goes right, they can be in the NCAA tournament. I'm going to predict, though, they finish 13 and 14, and I think that these freshmen and sophomores get a lot of experience and set themselves up well for a potential tournament run in 2026. So, any final thoughts?
I love that. Yeah, I love that.
Any final thoughts, Micah?
no, I think that's it.
Yeah. All right, there you have it. Nick, anything else you want to add about Notre Dame?
No, I think this team is just ready to go, ready to be built.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's going to do it. We'll be back tomorrow night with Pittsburgh for Nick and Micah. That's going to do it for us, and it just means less.